With the COVID-19 pandemic upon us, the faculty of Columbia University School of Social Work have mobilized to form the COVID-19 Action Initiative with the mission of monitoring developments and disseminating information that can be helpful to social workers and the clients that we serve. So today we are definitely excited to have with us Dr. Alan Zubin, who is one of our esteemed professors and the director of the MI Skills-Based Lab. Also joining us is Mary Pietmeyer. She's a coordinator and a certified lab instructor, and they are going to be presenting with a few of our other highly skilled certified MI lab instructors today. We have Janelle Sinias, Elba Torres Perez, and Karina Rodriguez. All right, and with that, Alan, turning the mic over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Tiffany. I want to thank the COVID-19 Action Team, directed by Desmond Patton, for facilitating this process, and Tiffany and her group for setting it up and organizing. Just to give you a little background here about the group that's presenting today, they're all certified lab instructors, which means they went through training at the school and passed the certification test. And for those who are not aware, the School of Social Work has an MI lab program for training social work students. It's been run for about 2 years now. And many of our students have been trained in MI skills as a beginning way to prepare them for the field. And what you'll see today is sort of some of the key issues that we use in training students for MI interviewing. It's called motivational interviewing. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the COVID issues, at least some of those issues, and then how they get linked with MI. So I'm going to just start with that. So recent data has shown that mental health status, and most of this is not new for many of you, have been negatively affected by the coronavirus. So I'm going to present to you some data by the Kaiser Foundation. So what we see in the first slide is adults who have been sheltering in place and what has been the negative impact. So that you do see some differences here between people who've been sheltering in place and those who have not been sheltering in terms of their negative response to being in that situation. So there is more serious or more issues around sheltering than people that have not been sheltering in place. And overall, there's a 47 to 37% differences. Next slide. People who have lost their job and income, as we see, some differences between those who have lost their job and those who have not lost their job in terms of the negative impact. 26% to 15% differences in serious or more negative impact. And overall, it's a 54 to 40%. These are just basic figures that have been done in the last few months in terms of the COVID issues. Third issue, regarding people in terms of income, it seems the people that have more lower incomes have been more negatively affected. Not surprising, so that there's a major impact between the less than 40% $1,000 a year and those that earn 90%. So there's an overall issue between your job status, your income status, and whether you sheltered in place in terms of the negative impact. All this is implications for how we use MI and the importance of MI in the process. Next slide. Okay, there are many, many issues such with the pandemic. I can't go into all of them today, but I just want to summarize what I think some of the major issues are. As many of you have been coping with the non-adherence to preventive measures, you see Governor Cuomo go on TV every morning and every afternoon and keeps talking about the preventative measures. It's a major issue in terms of, and as we open up the environment or the settings itself, it becomes even more of an important issue. So that's one of the big issues we're facing. Mary, go a little slower. You're going too fast, Slate. Increased risk. Okay, so individuals having substance abuse disorders, major issue. People who are smoking, who use opioid disorders, or have more respiratory problems and other issues, and it does affect them. Just people with chronic respiratory conditions themselves, older individuals, people who are lonely and social support, lacking social isolation, people not residing in permanent settings. We're talking about homeless here, incarcerated persons, individuals in unstable marital relationships. We have an increase of domestic violence issues, and healthcare workers. All are at risk of these things. The issue with many of these people is they lack social resources, or they lack access to healthcare resources and social support, which further increases the healthcare risks. So this is the picture we're dealing with right now. So now I'm going to turn to the essence of what we're talking about today, motivational interview. Right, there are people, as I said before, this is not all the issues, suicide and so on. So, okay, so I'm going to talk about MI Spirit, which is the heart of MI and motivational interviewing. It basically is the framework for which we practice. So let me give you sort of the overview here. Okay, so we talk to MI Spirit. And so there are 4 elements that we consider, or attitudes. Overall philosophy is an overall framework. So as you see, whatever happens here in motivational interviewing, all the skills and strategies in the process embody these 4 components: collaboration, compassion, acceptance, and invocation. Next slide. All right, just going to summarize these things, because what you're going to see today is you're going to see the illumination of this and the examples of how it's carried out in our 4 exquisite clinicians here, who will demonstrate these 4 components of it, and we'll talk more about it as we move along the case, review the cases. So what we're talking about here is collaboration, and that we're talking about creating a safe environment that enables the individuals to reveal their struggles, activate their strengths, and make decisions for positive change. Acceptance, demonstrated understanding of the individual's perspective and so on, difference in their own. I'll tell you a little bit about this. If students come to the School of Social Work and they often feel like all I need to do is gather information and then give them solutions. And what we learn with motivation, that probably is counterproductive. You just cannot do this way. And that's a sort of a layman's view. Just tell me what the problem is. I'll ask you to get some information and give you information. And this has to happen in a different way with MI. You have to develop an environment that's creative. It enables a person to activate their struggles and their strengths. You have to have somebody who you can understand their perspective, because if your perspective is different than your own, you're more likely to have an issue with them. So you have to sort of understand that often the perspectives that people bring to the sessions may differ than your own. I haven't got a drinking problem. I don't know why you're bothering me about it. I don't know what you're talking about, and so on. So the initial response is to give information and to involve and to engage with them and persuade them and to try to change them. It goes counterproductive. MI means listening and developing a safe environment, and then learn how to accept people where they're at and how they may differ than your own. It's a very different way of reacting often than we talk about. It's important to have compassion. It's not much understand their pain and what they're going through, to be empathic and so on. And so they show them that you're a collaborating partner. You're not an expert. You're there as a partner to sort of produce an atmosphere, conditions for change. And the last is evocation, to recognize and demonstrate that you don't change anybody. The person has to make their own decision to change. You can facilitate, but you, in a sense, cannot be the person to change. The person has to figure out on their own of what, how, and where, and when to make the change. So those are the 4 components that we embody in MI approach. And you will see these demonstrated today in our sessions. Next slide. Okay. So let me say a little bit about MI's history. It's gone by a long way. It's been around, MI's been around since the 90s, and even earlier, because a lot of it we talk about was inspired by Carl Rogers, emphasizing highly empathic understanding and unconditional positive regard. And so MI is basically built on a framework of listening and accepting and understanding, and sort of what Carl Rogers talked about, empathic understanding, being with the client, being where they are. And through that relationship and through the person's self-acceptance and self-understanding and also support, people can change very radically. MI has been studied in 3,000 different, been published in maybe 5,000 papers and been studied in 30 countries or more. And there are more 300 clinical trials and so on. So MI has been widespread and has been disseminated and has become part of an underlying foundation. And MI is now used in a variety of treatments as part of the foundation itself. I've used MI with medication studies. I've used MI with cognitive behavior therapy. I've used MI in case management. It builds into many different kinds of approach, and it becomes a foundation, a way to approach people and a way to deal with people. And so overall, MI is committed to affirming strengths, the capabilities of the person, focusing, clarifying, and discussing priorities for change, and drawing out ideas and solutions to change from the person, as you'll see. So it's a very facilitative process. It's really a way of being with people and a way of collaborating with people, which goes in many ways to what people will maybe not do with people. People want to tell people what to do, and they want to persuade people to do. And as you will see in the interviews, much of our training is geared to teaching, experiencing how to do that, to do some kind of experiential training to practice these things, because they are not automatic. Persons have to work these things and have to develop these skills and so on. So it seems simple on the surface, but in many ways it's much more complicated, as you will see in the interviews itself. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to talk about the first phase of this presentation will be focused on asking what matters, to try to figure out where people are at and how do you help to get them to ask what matters. And rather than telling them what matters, trying to find out what really matters to them, the key word is really, because what they'll say, how you doing? Fine, everything's okay. But really, what you want to do is to try to get them to really, really understand what they're going for, what they really want, and what will really help them. So we're going to talk about Carmen. Let's turn to her. Carmen is a 36-year-old woman. She just lost her job. She has a 5-year son living at home, a single parent, and she really feels she's struggling with not having the job, not having much to do during the day in terms of herself and so on. She spends a lot of her time taking care of her son, but at the same time feels stressed by it. And she feels unable to cope with the demands of being a single parent. The problem right now is that she's been sober for the last 6 months. She's had a drinking problem in the past, and she's been concerned about her drinking. And she's concerned that without a job and combining with family stress, she'll go back to drinking. So this has been her major concern, and she's come to her social worker to basically to tell her what's going on or what's her concerns about, and she feels really at risk for a full-blown relapse. So she's really at a point now where she doesn't know what to do and how she's going to cope with this. In this interview, you'll see Karina playing Carmen, and Elba will be her counselor, and so on. Elba and guys are ready. Okay.
Hello, Carmen. It's very good to see you today.
Thank you. It's good to see you too.
I'm just really happy to see your face and wondering how things are going for you these days. These are tough times.
Definitely tough time for sure. I wish I could have better news for you. I'm struggling a lot. The pandemic has caused my life to go into havoc. I lost my job. I have a 5-year-old home. I have to play teacher, and I just don't have. I just don't have. I just don't have it together. I'm overwhelmed and I'm a mess.
I hear you. That sounds like so many things. You know, not only do you have to deal with everything going on outside, now it's impacting you personally with no work, and now this new role as a teacher also to your son, and just balancing everything. I could imagine it sounds like you said, havoc in your home. Um, what are some of the things that are really in the everyday forefront for you in terms of worries?
Well, childcare obviously is an issue for everybody. I lost my job, but I also don't have childcare. So even if I go get a job, then I have the issue who's going to take care of my son. Um, so that's really what's pressing, and not being able to make ends meet, pay bills.
Right. Sounds kind of like a double-edged sword here. You can go out and find work, but then who's going to watch your son? And then how are you going to pay your bills? And it just sounds like all of this weight on you, just kind of snowballing, like you said, and probably adding to the way that you're feeling like a mess and like you don't have it together, like you said. Can you tell me a little bit more about those feelings?
Well, when I start thinking about it, I feel like my chest is getting tighter. I feel like I'm gasping for air, and then I just shut down. Like, then I just don't do anything. I just completely shut down, and I just don't see the point, because there's just so much to do. There's so much that I need. There's so much that needs to get done. There's so much waiting on me. So I just shut down, and I just can't.
Yeah, it's not surprising. You know, you've mentioned so many things, and it just sounds like it starts in here, and then it just kind of goes into your body, and just like your body is telling you like you can't do all of these things. So just take a beat, take a minute. Um, but then the worries start again, because that means you're not doing anything and moving forward, and I guess fixing these things, right?
Yes. So I mean, the most overwhelming feeling is not having control, not being able to do much about it, feeling powerless. Um, so it's not like I could just go start applying for jobs. The unemployment rate is about 17%. Um, you know, if I go out, I can't go. Most of the businesses are not open, so I can't just walk out. And then when I start thinking about um, the things I need to do for unemployment, and I try calling, I just shut down, and I don't even want to do anything, or just want it to go away.
Yeah, like the hopelessness and the worries and the powerlessness and anxiety all around all of these issues just seem to immobilize you, it sounds like, and make you feel just so unable to move forward and not even see that. That's what I hear from you, and what you're saying, and just even the way you seem to be carrying your body right now, you know. So it sounds like you want to move forward, you want to find ways to keep going, and you are trying, and you're really pushing yourself beyond those feelings of like worry and anxiety, but that there's something that's stopping you, and that's all of the things, all of the things.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for like letting me vent and hearing me out. It helps alleviate, being with you and not being able to share that with someone.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here to do that for you. And you know, I know that we can start to work on some things. But right now, I think you have a lot, and just acknowledging that, and acknowledging that you are, just by thinking of the things you need to do, you're moving towards where you need to be, despite how you're feeling just so powerless and hopeless. You're moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Great. Now, Mary and Janelle are going to review the interview and comment, and then we'll have this question and answer with the audience, and we'll go on. Janelle, why don't you start?
Great. Alba, wonderful job. I think everyone can definitely relate to all of the reflections you were doing, affirmations that you were doing, and attentive listening. You really help birth the ground for Karina, to be able to share what was going on. And before moving forward, you just made sure that you were extremely clear about what you were hearing before moving forward, which I think was helping her to be able to feel comfortable and helping her feel understood.
Mary.
Yes, I agree 100% that Elba was demonstrating a explicit, empathic, and genuine concern for Carmen. And that was definitely shown through her accurate reflections. Some were actually captured the competing feelings that Carmen was expressing. And then throughout the whole conversation, she was right next to her. There was no indication of Elba trying to push Carmen in one direction or the other. She allowed Carmen to take control.
Okay. I'm going to ask Karina how she felt, and I'm going to ask Elba what she did. Karina.
Thank you, Alan. So for me, I think was really genuinely felt that it was, I love the fact that she listened to me and she just let me express my feelings. I also have a 5-year-old right now and I'm working. So it is stressful. So having someone listen to you and just hear you out and, like, as Mary suggested, not guide you left or right, just kind of let you go along with and stay with your feelings and be present with the issue that you're navigating was really helpful for me and comforting. And I also felt the connection, and she gave me definitely gave me some self-awareness, how I am sitting, because I forgot to lock my door, and anytime you might hear my 5-year-old. So yes, so she picked up on that. So that was great. And she pointed, Elba also was really keen in and very present, that she also picked that up and brought that to my attention, how I was, how my presence and my way of being, she was really tuned in to me. So that was really helpful for me.
Great. Elba.
That was just a lot of reflection and just trying to let Karina just air out all of the things. There was so much, real issues going on there, and then like a lot that Carmen is trying to achieve, and not even seeing that she's actually doing something just by getting up in the morning. I don't know if I could do the same. So just listening and trying to be that kind of holder of all of this, and just not direct anyway, just trying to let her put these things out there and see all of the things that are going on, plus all the things she's already doing.
Great. So everybody, you notice that there was mostly reflections, and not a lot of information sharing, not a lot of questions, mostly reflections. The second thing was that there was nothing in Elba's comments about herself. It was all on Carmen. What was she feeling? What was she doing? She had no opinions about it. She had no judgment about it. She just listened and listened and listened. The third element is, and I love this at the end, I don't know if you were, she had what we call it's maybe not, in much more of in a kind of a meditation approach, is a loving kindness. It's like she says, I really want to help. I really want to be. And there was a loving kindness in her attitude and approach, which I think gave Karina or Carmen a sense of she's with her, she's got somebody with her, and she feels less alone and feels more comfortable. So in that thing, in terms of the initial interview, asking what matters, she really got it. I'll say more about that when I review the strategies and more of a MI framework, but that's about it. So let's take some questions from the audience, all four of us, and reflect a little more about it. Questions?
All right, we're waiting for a couple questions to come in, but we do have an attendee who did comment that I tend to get so stuck in the empathy sometimes that I can get pulled down. I noticed and I liked how Elba was able to empathize and reflect, yet she was able to listen for the strength within what Carmen was saying. Elba noted Carmen's desire to move forward. So that was one of the comments from our attendees into speaking about like that. You know, I think the challenge and the trickiness of balancing that, like moving through the empathy and moving the empathy into being able to reflect.
Right.
Listen for
okay. Okay. The alcohol issue was not addressed. I understand.
I can't answer that, Alan.
Yeah, go ahead, Karina.
So the alcohol issue was probably most likely not addressed, even though that's something that most of us want to address as clinician, because I didn't bring it up. So really, Elba, the therapist, is really following my lead because she is staying present with me in what I'm bringing up and what it's important. That has not surfaced during our conversation so far, and I haven't brought it up. So she's really staying with me and really, as I take one foot forward, she's taking the same step with me, really letting me guide and lead what's pressing for me, what's bothering me. So that's why the alcohol thing didn't bring up, and we wouldn't bring it up unless it was a threatening or a safety issue, but it's not clearly yet, and I haven't brought it up.
Totally agree. It's patient-client centered, and so she's staying where she's at. If she brought it up many ways, what she would get is defensiveness and reaction, and she really wants to establish a relationship with her. That's the primary method. And so the means are you have to have the relationship first without dealing with the solutions yet. And if you try to get in solutions too early, you usually run into trouble. Other questions?
Yep, we have another attendee asking, what would you do in MI if the client is more reserved and not speaking?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think you have to mirror the client. If the client is slow, then you're slow. If the client's not talking, then you listen. And so there's nothing wrong with silence and being involved in going at the pace of the client. If you try to move too quickly and so on, I think you'll be pressuring the client. So the client, in many ways, may not be ready to have a full discussion about the issues, and that's fine if that's what they're at. But we can talk about it and say, you know, how do you want to deal with this discussion? And maybe they really would prefer to leave early, or they may have another session later on. Well, you have to find out where the client really wants to go with the process and not where you want to go with the process.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, we have a couple more that came in through the chat, through the Q&A box. We'll take, and then I know you guys need to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
What would it change if the client presented with signs or symptoms of alcohol use?
I think you're talking about detoxification issues, withdrawal issues. If that's what's the case, then I think we got to, as Karina said, if that is an issue of major concerns, the person is going through delirium tremors and things, then you got to take a more aggressive stance and say, I'm really concerned, but you ask permission first. So it doesn't mean that we don't deal with those issues at all, because if they come up and there are serious concerns, then you have to sort of begin to express those concerns, but do it in an MI framework, which by asking the client permission, can we talk about what's going on right now in the situation? Doesn't mean you don't deal with it. It means you deal with it in an MI framework.
And it sounds like what you just answered too, Alan, would speak to also, like another attendee asked, what if we are expected to assess substance use in detail with clients? I think what you just said speaks to that and answers that question as well, to assess it, but utilizing it in my approach.
Yeah, I have an issue with that. Most agencies start with an assessment, and I think that probably is not a good idea because it interferes with the relationship and the building of support and just going through the question and answer session with them. So I usually recommend is what Elba did with Karina is let's listen, reflect, and then maybe say, can we do an assessment at the second stage? But you have to have a relationship. So the questionnaire is not so much for the client. The client himself knows what the issues are. You want to find out more about it. So that's about what your needs are and what the agency's needs are. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I think you have to do it in a framework that's in terms of supportive and collaborative and with MI spirit built into it.
And so last question before we move on to the next one, and I think you'll especially appreciate this one, is why is using reflection such a key component in MI?
It is. Reflections are the sine qua non, the essence of it, because it really, and I'll say more about it when I talk about the strategies, but one of the things we learn in the lab sessions is to use reflections and how to use reflections. Reflections is a basic framework of engaging with people and rapport building. I'll say more about it later, but it is so important and it's not always easy to do. As you can see, even Elba was struggling in her own way to try to get the right reflections and to make it accurate and empathic. And we're always struggling, everybody. It never ends. Okay, let's move on. Thank you, everybody. Case, let's talk about Francine. Francine. Okay. This is the second case. Everybody meet Francine. She's 28 and she's living with a roommate, Paula. She's having great problems with Paula because Paula keeps bringing friends over, and Francine's worried that she's going to get the virus if this keeps happening. She's not using preventative measures. She seems to be unaware of it or uncaring about it. And Paula is a great friend of hers, and she had a good long-term relationship. And she's now feeling immobilized what to do because she doesn't want to lose her ties with Paula. At the same time, Francine is beginning to experiencing some issues related to the being and sheltering in place, as I call it. And she's experiencing insomnia. She can't sleep, lack of structure. She finds herself binge eating at night. And so this isn't two problems she's having, a problem with the roommate, the same problem about herself. And she really is struggling with both of these issues right now. Is not sure what to do and how to handle it. So Mary is going to be Francine, who knows that she's going to be being her Francine. And Janelle is going to be her counselor, who just met her for the first time. And they're trying to find out what's going on. You're on, guys.
Hi, Francine. How are you?
Hi, Janelle. I'm okay. A lot of struggles going on in my life right now.
Tell me about the struggles.
So I live with my roommate, Paula, and we've been good friends ever since college. And I guess from her perspective, which I'm trying to understand as well, is, you know, she's been talking about how young people sort of go unscathed with the virus, getting symptoms and having to be hospitalized. So she thinks, you know, it's not a big deal if like her boyfriend or friends come over to our apartment and hang out. And I'm a little weary about it because there are, you know, anyone can get symptoms, anyone can get sick. You can't really predict. And so I'm really struggling with how to approach her about that issue. Because I don't want to cause any kind of disruption to our relationship. We're really close. And then on top of that, now that we're staying home and I work from home, really no reason to go outside. My sleep schedule is like totally off track. I can stay up till 3 a.m. and then sleep till 10 a.m. or and I find myself, dreary and tired throughout the day. And I think there's like a lack of motivation to do things. It's almost like a boredom.
Yeah. So definitely sounds like you have a lot on your plate right now, at least mentally. It sounds like some of your thoughts have been around, number one, everything going on with the pandemic and health related issues that may be coming into contact with yourself through your roommates, friends that are coming by. It sounds like it's definitely bringing up some anxiety for you, just the unknown of where this could possibly go. And you've been doing all that you personally can to be safe, but yet you're still being faced with some of these difficulties as your roommate has control to bring, other people into the apartment. And then it also sounds like you're having some difficulties with this new normalcy of your schedule being, I guess, all over the place, and you not having some kind of rhythm to it. And so you have some difficulties with sleeping as a result, and even noticing that your eating habits have changed. Yeah, it definitely sounds like you have a lot going on there. Just tell me a little bit about what seems to be, I guess, the issue when it comes to speaking with your roommate regarding the health issues and what your anxieties are about that.
Yeah. So I think, there's every time, like if I do mention casually, like, I'm sure her friends and stuff are being safe, but, we don't entirely, like, everything's sort of unknown. We don't really entirely know who, some people can get very sick, some don't. And she's like really steadfast in the fact that young people are fine. And so I don't want to come off like as a like pedantic with her. Like I don't want to like have like say, well, I'm trying to like teach her something, or it's hard to get her to listen when there's two sides that you can find on the internet.
Yeah. So it sounds like one of, I guess, the biggest thought processes that you're having has to do with the fact that although you have a stance and you have, I guess, these anxieties as well as concerns about her bringing in her friends, she may too have thoughts about it, and she may too have a stance that may be different from yours and may cause some conflict if you all have that conversation. I'm wondering if you see any connections to this issue and the sleeping and eating, perhaps.
Yes, I never thought about that.
Can you tell me a little bit about what connections you may be seeing?
That's a really good point. I think definitely the stress and anxiety, it's almost a no-brainer. Actually, having you tell me that like really put my words back to me and made sense that, I'm up sort of, part of the reason I'm up so late is my mind is racing about like, how do I talk to her about this? And like, what if it's too late to talk to her about this? What if, what if I don't know whether I'm, one of us is going to get sick? So definitely there must be a link there. And then another way I cope with stress and anxiety is I eat and I binge. And on top of sort of the lack of exertion of energy during the day and being sort of very sedentary, it causes boredom, I guess, and that also causes me to eat. But I think a lot of the sleep issues and eating issues are me trying to cope with keeping what is inside of me that I want to, you know, scream out, but don't want to scream out because I don't want to ruin our relationship.
Yeah. So it definitely sounds like, I mean, number one, you're dealing with this pandemic in a way that you could, you know, the best way in which you could. And so you've been trying to do everything you can to remain healthy, remain safe, sheltering in. And there are some conflicts with that with regards to your roommate bringing her friends over. And that in return can be bringing up some anxieties that can be resulting in you wanting to have, not wanting to have, but having a sleep schedule that may be off a bit, or having a lack of interest in wanting to move around or just be as mobile as you were before, and possibly leading to some of the eating habits that you've been having.
Yes, that's definitely right. Alan's saying,
Good.
oh, you're muted, Alan.
Let's bring her back, Karina, Elba, and everybody.
All right.
All right, we're going to talk about the interview. This is what we do in our classes, so this is not unusual. So I'm going to ask Karina first, her response, Elba next, and then we'll talk about it. Karina.
Thank you, Janelle and Mary. You guys did an outstanding job. Janelle, I could be my therapist any day. God knows I need one. So I like to say I love how you started off. I think it's very powerful, the way which opened up to give Mary the room to just go wherever she wants to go, wherever her heart desires and she most needs it. So I think that's really powerful. Throughout, there was a lot of reflections. There was summaries plus reflection and then a question, which in mine, we really emphasize for every, there should be 3 reflections for every question, is that for information gathering, so you can have a better understanding of the person that you're working with, and for them themselves to raise that awareness. And we can see that by you navigating and implying using those skills, you gave Mary more awareness. Francine, she's like, oh, I didn't think of that, because the way you kept reflecting back and being that mirror where you just kind of compiled everything together for her and really said, this is what I'm hearing you say, this is what's happening, can you please confirm? So she went back and reiterated that. And she felt understood, she felt heard, and you also made that light bulb go off for her, right? Because that's part of the MI spirit, is really making the clients have the aha moment and creating that awareness by us reflecting and summarizing, because they have the answer and they know the situation better than we do. But it's our job really just to bring it up to them. And you did it in such a gentle, very affirming, very acknowledging, and accepting of her and her situation. So that was really, really powerful. So thank you, Janelle. That was a great job. Thank you.
Elba.
Yes, I agree. I was trying to think of like how Janelle made me feel, and I feel like Janelle gives you like a warm hug, and then she's also a mirror. So it's like such a beautiful combination, and exactly what the MI spirit is. You know, you're just kind of like, all right, just give it all to me, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to hold it, and then I'm going to let you know what you're saying, and you're going to hear it, and it's going to click, which is completely
Fantastic.
like a beautiful, just like demonstration of what we're trying to do with all of the things that our clients are saying. They're, you know, like Mary, Francine was saying the things, and when Janelle reflected in this beautiful way, Mary even said, you put the words back to me and it made sense. So that is the power of reflections. And Janelle was just listening and reflecting. It wasn't like she was making up solutions or driving the conversation in any way. Mary got it, and Mary almost looked shocked that she did like see it before or think of it before. And so kudos.
Okay, Mary.
Yes, basically, I think Janelle demonstrated the function of a reflection. It's not only to build an engaging rapport. She made me feel welcome. I felt like I could tell her anything. But at the same time, I processed my issues on a deeper level. I have so many things going on that are, I almost felt like I was just sort of blurting everything out. And she sort of has like collected all these issues and in a coherent, meaningful way, in a logical way, brought it back to me. And I think that's a clear, explicit demonstration of what a reflection is.
So I got a question for Janelle. How did you do all this? What's your magic?
No, I don't have any magic. Really, I think attentive listening is just the key, especially in this rapport building stage. Just really listening and making sure that you understand. And it's okay to get some no's, meaning that's not what I meant, or no, let me clarify. You want that. I think you want that in this stage. You want to make sure that it's not about being right, but it's about listening. So just honing in on what your client is saying and just paying attention to connections and not being afraid to make those connections, but also not being afraid to hear no or let me clarify. I think that's really strong and really necessary in the beginning stage, letting the client know that they are the teacher of their situation and they are going to guide you into understanding more about their situation, and being humble about that experience is necessary.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Janelle's not afraid of hearing, no, that's not what I mean. She just feels important to connect. And the no is part of the connect. The yes doesn't mean you have to get the right answer, but as long as she's connecting with her and can respond to it, it keeps that connection alive and well. All right, let's turn to the audience, the attendees for questions. We're all on board now. Questions?
Yep. So we have a couple questions that are in the Q&A box. This one from an attendee, it's kind of like a two-part question. So I'm going to read through it and then let me know if you want me to clarify anything. So we have a person saying, I really wonder how we can suspend our own judgment in a situation like this. Any thoughts from the panelists or even other participants? And so that for other participants, if you guys have thoughts, definitely please feel free to share those in a chat box. And then the other part of the question was following up on this. It's a situation that activates some feelings in many of us. I do think Janelle demonstrated a great job of this. What might be a drawback of sharing your empathy by saying that must be really hard? I can imagine feeling the same way. So how do we?
Let me take the first question and maybe we can all talk about the empathy part because empathy is more complicated. I think they talk about this in meditation as well. You have to approach an interview with emptying your mind. You can't come in with a preconception what they should be doing. Now that will come up, but you got to let that pass because basically you're here to listen and reflect and so on. So you got to keep an open mind or an empty mind. And when you come in and not come in with a preconceived belief or prejudice or bias, because that will get you in trouble. So you have to work at that. And part of our training is to be self-reflective. So you say, I don't like these kind of people. You have to feel that, experience that, and say, well, this is going to interfere with the process. Let me get past that. And if you can't get past that, you need supervision or some help with it. So I think that's at least the initial answer. What's the second question? Again, I thought I lost that one.
The second question is, what might be a drawback of sharing your empathy by saying that must be really hard? I can imagine feeling the same way.
Okay, comments, group? I must be feeling the same way.
Well, I could say, there's something that I bring up in labs sometimes. Let's say when we have one example that I use is if you have somebody that passes away and we typically have the immediate response to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And we always have the need to say, I'm sorry. And the other person, we all process grief and loss very differently, but we tend to be very uniform as a society, how we respond to people that are mourning or have just lost. So this is a tricky situation or tricky situation, how you will respond to empathy. Like, oh, he lived a good life. He was older. That sort of sympathy does not make it any better that I lost somebody who was older. So I completely understand. And yes, we do have to be cautious around when we do empathize, and it has to be genuine. It has to come from the heart, and it has to be that you recognize it. Sorry just seems to be just a blanket statement and like in a reaction. You can acknowledge this could be, it seems that this is a difficult time for you. Not that I understand, because you may not understand, and that can backfire if you empathize with a person who is in mourning, who is in pain, and you again work on the assumption that you understand and that you know their pain. And that's one of the instances where I've seen empathy go the wrong way, right? I don't know if that makes it clear, but overall in MI, what we try to do is be empathetic towards the person in a way that is genuine, that you acknowledge, you recognize, and you accept for who they are and where they're at.
Well said. Well said. Anybody else?
Yep.
We have time for one more question because I have to get back.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a really important one to look into as well. Is like, how do we encourage clients to express when we have not gotten the reflection correct? Many of my clients feel odd correcting me due to their work with other therapists and case managers who claim complete authority in their sessions. So how do we encourage clients to express when we may not have gotten the reflection correct?
I could speak to that. I think, and I'm not sure if I did it or not in the role play, but I think having certain cues for clients, like, is that correct? I think that helps encourage it because it's an actual question versus leaving the autonomy up to the client to, speak back or respond in a way, especially if it's the beginning stages of the relationship. I don't know if they would be comfortable doing that without those cues. So I think those cues can be extremely helpful in just letting them know that this is going to be the culture here. I will reflect back to you what I'm hearing, and I will always look for your consent in a way before we move forward. And that's really important because I think it's laying out the foundation that you as the worker want to understand them. And that's a key component of moving forward in the sessions. If I don't understand you, the work that we're doing here is not going to be powerful. It's just not. And again, every modality is different, but for MI and having MI spirit, that I think is a very key component to how you're almost, I don't like to say winning your client over, but allowing them to feel safe. You're allowing them to feel safe because you are checking in with them and you are making sure you understand them, not just by saying, oh, I understand, but by reflecting back to them what you're hearing and allowing them the space to say, no, that's not correct, or yes, that's correct.
The point that she's making, I totally agree with Janelle, is client has some autonomy there. It's not that there's a kind of like passive recipient of information. It's a two-way process. So you'll take responsibility of what you say, and the client has to take responsibility of what they say. So this is a joining process, and it's a empowering process. It's not like one is talking to somebody and telling them what to do, and it's not a hierarchical process. There's not an expert role. It's a partnership and a joint partnership, and you have mutual responsibilities. Mm-hmm. We have to go on. So let me just summarize, Mary. Okay, I'm just actually, a lot of what was said, I'll say right now, was already said in the discussion. And what I'm just going to do is put it maybe in a little different language in terms of what MI does and what they do. So the first phase of it, and is what everybody did, nobody was trying to solve any problems here or to move in any direction. All they were trying to do is to find out what's going on. So where the person's at, as you see, everybody did that. What's driving them, what's important, and asking clarifying questions. And you see that was happened each of these interviews. The last part is called really listening to what the person, and that takes work. It's work. It's not something you do. You listen, you breathe in, you breathe out, and you try to hear what people are saying and see how you're feeling, which may interfere with that process, So really listening is to sort of move away from your own feelings and trying to get to where that person's feeling themselves. Next. How do we communicate that we are listening and showing understanding of words? Well, because in a way, if you keep asking questions, the client or the person doesn't know what you're hearing. You're asking questions, you're putting the burden back on them. So the client wants to know, the person wants to know that you're hearing them and they're being heard and you're with them. So by keep asking questions and so on, in a way is counterproductive. It pushes people away and puts them more on defensive. So what's the answer? Next. Reflection, 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 reflection. You'll hear about it. We practice reflections in the morning and the afternoon, and we practice it in distant sessions. Reflections is the culmination of what we do in trying to capture the essence of what's going on in the person. And if you listen to what goes on in daily lives, people more or less will give their opinions or they'll ask questions, but they won't reflect. Reflection puts the burden on you to try to understand. So there's a burden on the recipient and trying to encode what the person's saying. So reflections are used in many ways at replace of questions. And I will demonstrate sometimes with students that I have to ask any questions, but I can get a lot of information on what person's feeling just by reflecting back, because the person's more likely going to tell you what they're feeling if they seem to understand that you understand what's going on. Okay. So reflections validate, acknowledge, and that's very important. And particularly important is affirmative reflections. It's not just reflection something about the qualities of that person, the strengths of the persons, and shining light on their strengths. And so part of the reflections process is not only to listen, but listen affirmatively and try to see where that person's at. So it sounds to me like you're very committed to your children here in the same process we're talking about Carmen here. You're trying to work out and take the arrangements of your family, and you're trying to do something more with your life and try to make amends to what happened with your job situation and validate. So validating somebody, not just what they say, but validating specifically to their strengths and their good qualities. And we call this shining a light and facilitating self-confidence and actually prizing and celebrating the person. And if you took the lab sessions, we spent a lot of time on that in role plays and so on, because the people often don't know how to reflect affirmatively. And it's a skill that needs to be developed and to be worked on. Next. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next phase. And you've just felt with those interviews, which are done so well and so wonderfully by our lab instructors, about asking what matters. Now you're working on the second phase. Now, what are you going to do about all this process? Because now we understand it, we're concerned about it, you're concerned, and you seem to ready to make some changes. I know Francine said, oh my God, something I need to do. I guess there's something wrong here. It's not working for me. So how are they going to guide that person to move them in a direction that's both important to them and confident, they have confidence to do it? So just feeling it's important is a value, but they also have to feel confident. So let's say a person feels they're drinking, they want to do something about the drinking, but I can't seem to go to AA sessions all week. I'm not ready to make those decisions. What can you do? What is it you're ready to do? And maybe it's just the first step is finding an AA group or something like that. So it's in a sense of trying to highlight what's important and also what they feel confident about. Now, this is very important. It's not about you or what you think needs to be done. It's really to try to get a commitment and get them to express their concerns and their reasons and their commitment to a change. And your reflections then go back to that and reflect on that, affirming their changes and so on. This is the setup for the second phase of what we're talking about with the interviews. Next slide. Okay, last one. You are the mirror for change, reflecting it back so that your response is many ways facilitates that change process that you're seeing, healing, and so on. But remember one thing, that it takes the burden off you in some respects, that you don't have to be the person verbalizing the reasons for change, or you shouldn't be the person verbalizing the need to change. It's the client or the person you're working with that makes that decision and so on. That's the sort of a basic framework in which to facilitate motivation. Next. Okay. You all know Carmen, and you saw the first phase. And now this is the second interview, or at least the extension of the first interview, is now Carmen is meeting with Elba again for the second part of her interview to see what she wants to do. You're on, guys.
Carmen, so we talked about a lot of things here. You shared a lot with me. What is, of all of these things, how can I help you today?
So you said something before that really made me think, kind of like focusing and narrowing it in, like what's narrow it? Like you have all these things, bills, not having a job, childcare. So you make me think about what I should be, what I should be thinking about in terms of what do I need to address first. So I gave it some thought, but I have not yet completely decided on one thing or the other. Like how should I proceed?
Absolutely. It's so many competing things, and these are all very real issues that you're facing. How do you pick the most important when they're all important in their own way?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something you think that you could do today? One small step, something you might have already done that you haven't shared with me yet in the past few days to get to achieve one of those things on the list, or even the first step of one of those things?
That's a great question. Because I think if I identify one thing that I can do today, then that's going to help me not be in the space where I just kind of give up and throw my hands up in the air because I'm overwhelmed by all of it. So I think that's a good way for me to approach it. Thank you for that. It's very hard on the spot for me to pick one thing. But if I reflect and I think about what's mostly pressing, I think probably I would try to get online and figure out the unemployment situation process for get online and do some research to see how I can file for unemployment.
Right. And it sounds like you've already been thinking about this already. Like it sounds like you were already trying to come up with a plan and a way to get this done. What can you say has worked so far in terms of you going online? What has been okay for you to manage?
So it hasn't worked because when I'm gonna start to do it, like I just get I get really negative, and I just get really bogged down and overwhelmed. So I really haven't done anything yet. So getting for you just asked me today, maybe I'll make a list today or things that I need to get done, and then probably put it by my desk or put it by the refrigerator and okay, these are the things that you need to get done, and probably seeing that will push me more to getting it done.
Right. And I think, it's important for you to look at what you have accomplished. We've talked before about your sobriety. You've been sober for 6 months, and that was not an easy feat. Just getting to have a job and be in a place where you can take care of your son and support him. I think what are the things that helped you through that, and what can you reflect on from those? What are the things that stand out for you in that process, the things that were helpful to you? And I'm wondering if making lists and having a plan has worked for you in the past, and if that is what's inspiring this right now for you to take that route.
Thank you so much for using the word inspired, because I feel like at this point, with everything that's going on, being locked in, so much loss around the world, so much negativity, so much hardship, I think that that's key for me to feel inspired and find inspiration. And my 5-year-old is my inspiration. And I've had the urge to drink during this time and relapse, but I look at him and that makes me, not want to do that. So definitely he's my inspiration, and keeping the focus on him and doing better for me so I can do better for him.
Right. That's a beautiful thing. I know that has helped you in the past, kind of holding on to that and that desire to take care of your child, putting that at the forefront, and to have you kind of reflect on how much you have accomplished already just in these few, what seem like very long weeks for everyone, and especially in your situation, to be able to have made it through so far. I would love for you to be able to like hold on to that and have that continue to be your inspiration, both your son and both what you have done. Like you said, already getting a plan in your mind and putting that down on paper, I think sounds like a really good step forward for you today, and something that sounds manageable, especially with that inspiration now that's coming up for you. So first step, one thing you could do today, just that you're going to do as soon as we're done with this session.
I'm going to make a to-do list, and I'm going to put a to-do list, and I'm going to take a picture of my son and put it next to my son's picture, my to-do list.
Yes. And I want to see it next time. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. I want to comment, but I have to control myself. Janelle.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So Alba did some amazing work at being specific, which I think is always great. She kept driving the specificity. Okay. She was being extremely specific with what it is that she wanted to get from or pull from the client. So even if the client kept going general, she would bring her questions and reflective questions back to what is one thing or what's one step, so that, again, we're being super clear about next steps. She also was really good at affirming in this phase. I heard lots of affirmations, which is really helpful when you are looking to get someone to do more change talk and looking to get them to actually feel confident in the next steps. Affirmations. So great job doing that.
Mary.
Yeah, totally agree. I think I was noticing sort of at the start of the interview that Elba was still a little uncertain about where she wanted to go. And what Janelle did strategically was she said, as opposed to sort of pushing her to get something going, she went on deeper and said, what's the source? What's inspiring you? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to make the change? And then that brought her about her son. And that was affirming as well, right? That how important her son is. And then suddenly I heard a lot of change talk after that, once Karina verbalized what was the source of her motivation.
Great. Karina?
Definitely what Mary said. I think it's like, most of us can relate to this. Sometimes we're in a space where things are not going well, and we feel a little bit defeated, or, we're around chaos, or we have a lot of problems or challenges in life. And then, what inspires you is as basic. It takes you back to a time where that something was great, that something was good, that you had a great feeling. So she made me forget about COVID. She made me forget about unemployment. And she really helped me think and really made me think about what's important and what matters the most. And that's my son, right? And then I would do whatever I need to do and whatever it takes to get and be a better parent to my son and be a better person. So just what inspires you, that little bit really just like sparked up everything. Be like, all right, I got my to-do list now. You know, when I was not feeling like doing a to-do list. I was feeling overwhelmed. I had all these things I needed to do. So it didn't, once she asked me what inspires me, it didn't seem as daunting.
Great. Elba.
I gotta be honest, everyone, that last one, I really got way too into the acting here. It was like emotional to see, you know, Carmen kind of come to these conclusions and come up with this beautiful list and a picture of her son. Like, you know, you got me, Carmen. So I think the thing that worked here was that just kind of like thinking like this huge, big cloud of things and just like, what can we get done today? And you can go to bed tonight knowing you did something. And giving her kind of something to do, or I didn't even think of that. I wouldn't have even thought of that. Carmen thought of it. I let her do it. I let her drive that, and what has worked in the past and how is that going to help now? So I think that, yeah, it was good to see her come to that. And I think that's the whole point of MI, is just, I could have thought of 10 things that I could tell her to do, like just go online, just do the unemployment application, like come on. But the truth is that about so much more than that that's going on, and that's stopping that process for her. So like breaking it down in small steps.
Excellent. So talk about MI being strengths-based. Elba didn't do anything but reflect on restraints. She could have talked about risks of drinking and what's going to happen and all the negatives. But she kept working and working and working. And the key question, she said, what inspires you? Which is really to say, what is it's going to motivate you to make things different? And then Carmen talked about her son. And it seemed that she got very, I know who she is, she got very emotional because she's no longer acting. I think this is her. And so you got her in the way that was the most motivating part of the process. So it was really well done in terms of the MI spirit. All right, let's turn to the audience or the group for questions. I know there are a lot, and we have about 5 minutes for questions before we go to the next case. We have another case coming up. So questions.
Yes, one of our questions is, how do you know when it's appropriate to move from reflections, validations to change-related questions, moving towards solutions?
Okay. It seems to me that you want to be sure that she's ready to make that decision, whether she's ready to move. And so I think Elba here asked her about a couple of options. And the option she chose was most related to getting a list together, beginning to look for a job. I think that's where she's ready to make a change. So the planning becomes related to when she seemed ready to deal with that. And she said no, as Janelle would have said, you move on, you don't do that, you stay away. But if she said yes, and she's ready to make that one step in the direction, that's where she was ready to make the move. So you have to go where the clients are, and it's like kind of like between dancing and wrestling. You're dancing with the client, you're moving in the same, you want to keep in the same movement with them rather than wrestling, trying to get them to do something. So if they're moving with you in the right direction and they're making the change, then you're ready to move in that direction. Next question.
Okay, so then I'm going to be kind of continuing along that vein. Is at what point is it okay to offer resources available to achieve a goal expressed by a client? So example, client, I need an income, but all is closed now, so I'm hopeless. Is it appropriate for a therapist to suggest unemployment application? And is it appropriate to say that the lines are long and it might take more than one try and more than one follow-up to get the benefits?
I can speak to that. I kind of hear this same, these are the calls I get every day at my regular job. And it's something that is very difficult because we want to be just like open and listen and hold these things, but these are actual issues that our clients are are also dealing with. And I think that in terms of like giving resources, again, if that's with permission and if the client is asking for that. But I think I find a lot of times just holding that space and listening to how frustrating it is to even be in the situation they're in is the thing that we're really there to do. And just kind of slowing everything down for the client and explaining the barriers and trying to let them know that, you know, that this is what's going on, giving them some resources, again, if they ask and if they say, like, please tell me where the unemployment application is online. But most of the time I can tell you that using MI comes in the holding of all of these things, and just the collaboration with the client, coming up with a realistic plan based on COVID barriers that are very new to all of us and what that looks like, and just supporting them through that frustration, I think is the biggest thing I've been able to do with my MI skills, of how many barriers they face. I can tell you, just to get a client an ID has taken me 6 weeks, and he just got it today. And holding all of that frustration, I am so thankful for my MI skills and my reflection, and making him feel empowered that even though he feels like there's a barrier everywhere he turns, that he actually will get there someday.
One more question. We have to go on. One more.
Yep. So another question that came through is a lot of people are drinking more than usual. How do we determine if the drinking has become a problem for a client, since we cannot see if it impacts them in their usual setting, such as work or oversleeping? How do we differentiate from drinking more than usual versus alcohol abuse, utilizing like MI?
Yeah, I think if you are concerned about that and the drinking has changed, because I know this was somewhat, Elba didn't really get involved with that because Karina was really concerned about job and didn't seem like she was worried about losing her sobriety. She hasn't lost her sobriety yet. So there's no reason for her to deal with that part of it. Was not an issue for her. She had not been drinking. And if she was, then I think that probably would have been appropriate to ask her to do an assessment. But at this point, Karina was only concerned right now with trying to cope with her everyday situation and try to improve. And she was worried as the drinking was there, but her primary concern is what Elba dealt with was trying to do something about her job situation and making some decisions. But I think the issue for those questions, you go where the client's at. And if that's where the client's at, then you need to do that assessment and do it. So MI is a framework. It's a collaborative framework. It doesn't mean you don't do other things like assessments or interventions or medications. It's really a collaborative framework. So everything you would do would have to have the client's involvement and try to engage them in that decision-making, whether it's doing an assessment around drinking. But remember, what you want to do has to be incorporated to what the client wants to do, where the client's at. And that has to be kept in mind, because if you override where client's at, it's going to come back to haunt you. It's counterproductive. Okay, let's move on to Francine, Janelle, and Mary. Second phase, doing what matters.
Hi, Francine.
Hi, Janelle.
Okay, so I know you brought up a lot before about some of the things that have been on your mind and some of the challenges that you are currently experiencing. I'd like to ask you, what is important to you that you feel would need to change from where you are right now?
Sure. So what really struck me was your help in making the connection between the issues I'm having with my roommate and the stress, anxiety, overeating, insomnia. And so in my head, I've sort of been debating, well, I really like to address the insomnia and the overeating, yet I feel like I should address the source of that, what's causing that, which is the sort of issues with my roommate and her inviting people over. But I feel a little stuck because I can't really control what Paula does. So I'm not quite sure how to approach that.
Okay. So I'm definitely hearing that one thing that's important to you that you feel that you would like to change is definitely having that conversation with Paula about, how you're feeling, or sorry, how you're feeling, and where you should go from there. However, you're noticing that uh, you really can't control what happens with Paula, and that puts you in a different place. And so what I'm hearing is that you really want to start from where a place from where you can have control over the things that are happening. And it kind of sounds like it's bringing you back to some of the things that were coming up for you, such as your sleeping schedule and how you've been eating. Does that
Yes,
sound right?
that's exactly right. It's definitely, I feel that more confident in being able to address those issues right now, whereas the Paula issue I feel like is going to take some time.
And good. And I'm happy that you used the word confident, because I think that that's a really strong place to start. You being aware of the fact that this is something that you have control over, and this is something that you can actually make a change towards. So that's a very strong place to be. So kudos to you for being in that mindset.
Okay.
Okay. So what would you say would be the first step to take regarding your sleeping challenges?
I I guess what is sort of another thing contributing to it is sort of my lack of movement or exercise during the day. I do know, so I'm not necessarily tired. I'm tired all day. There's no like energy, building up energy during the day. And then, if I'm working out or walking a lot, exhausts my body, I'm ready to sleep. So I find that I'm kind of like in this weird limbo of just no up and down. So that I think is part of the reason my sleep is so messed up too.
Okay, great. So I'm hearing that maybe an association to why the sleep might not be, I guess, normal from what you remember, is because of the movement and energy that you may be exuding now that you're staying, practicing safe measures and staying home. And so can you just tell me a little bit about what you used to do for movement or exercise or things of that sort?
Sure. So I used to go to the gym, and obviously that's not an option right now. And I rarely kind of do well exercising on my own. So what I do at the gym is go to class, because I kind of need someone to hold me accountable. So I go to a lot of like gym, like yoga, Pilates classes, because then there are other people doing it alongside you, and they have the teacher looking at you. So I'd love to be able to recreate that somehow.
Okay. So great. So it sounds like what you used to do in the past was be able to go to the gym physically and take classes. But we also know that that's no longer available in that manner.
Yes.
Are there any ways that you know of that you can take the classes that you just mentioned in this time? Or is there any sort of way to have some sort of accountability or take classes at the same time from your home?
Yeah, I guess now that you mentioned that, I've had a few friends send me like links to like live Zoom gym classes and something else there. I don't know if it was Zoom or something like that. Um, and at the time when they were sending it to me, I was kind of like blowing it off because I was like so stressed out and just trying to like, I was so discombobulated by what was going on. But I think now that you've revived that memory, that is definitely kind of coincides with what motivates me to get my energy going.
Yeah. And how does it actually make you feel? Like, can you describe a little bit of how you feel when you usually come home from doing those exercises and things of that sort?
Well, naturally, exercising releases the endorphins, and you feel good, you feel stronger. It encourages more healthy behavior for me because I have to eat healthier to work out. I know if I eat bad food, it's harder to work out. So it's sort of a nice way, a momentum to making sure I'm keeping a healthy lifestyle. And on top of that, I tired at a good hour that's reasonable. Like, I go to bed at 10 or 11.
Yeah. So from what I've heard, it sounds like when we're talking about something that's important to you that you can actually have control over right now, one of the things that you brought up today is being able to exercise and be mobile so that you are exuding energy, and then hopefully in return getting yourself worked in a way that is going to bring on a healthy habit to sleep well, and as well, I'm hearing, to eat well. So those are two things that you can actually take on that's under your control, and it seems like they're important to you and that you would be able to make a change doing.
Yes, it made me feel so good.
Be continued. Okay, Karina, Elba.
Amazing.
Okay, Karina,
All right.
you're on.
Yes, I am indeed. Okay, so to name a few of the MI skills that Janelle used in this section of planning was the linking back to past experience when Mary has succeeded, or times where she has been able to do what she's no longer able to do currently, right? So that was linking back to the past. The other MI skill that she used was envisioning. She asked Mary, how does it make you feel? And then she said, describe that feeling to me. And Mary was glowing and she felt so great, and it boosted her confidence. Like, I did this, I can do this again. And I love the way it feels. And that also evoked motivation for change and action, and going into, I need to do this. This makes me feel good. Why am I not doing it? So I can see all that happening in Mary's eyes and feeling so great about that feeling. So taking her back to that feeling of accomplishment or things that she does for herself that make her feel great and make her feel good, and she knows she's at a healthy place and a better place when she does those things. So definitely those. I always love how Janelle opens up. I think is really powerful. The opening, how we ask, and it's really crucial. She asks, tell me what's important. What is important to you? Like, you tell me, what do you want to talk about? What do you need? What do you want to discuss? What's burning for you? What's, so within that one sentence, it's really open it up, and it's the empowerment piece. It's allowing the client, it's empowering the client to direct and for her to guide. So definitely empowering her, giving Francine the opportunity to explore and have that reflection on her own. Like, really, what do I really want? And out of everything that I have going on, or the challenges I have, how do I want to go about this? So definitely empowering the client, being client-centered, helping her envision, linking back to his past success, in addition to all the summaries and reflections and affirmations that really help make it a great session, and help Mary have those aha moments, and help Mary realize that she can do this, and boost her confidence and the ability for her to be able to do this, despite her not feeling early on, she said she was feeling anxious, that she didn't want to take head on that conversation with her roommate, and being in an environment that she doesn't feel comfortable.
Great. Elba.
Yeah, I ditto to all of that. And also, I just feel like this process, Janelle pointed out that Mary felt confident about what she wanted to do. And I think that just like saying that to her sort of changed the way that Mary was talking about what she was going to do. Janelle didn't go forward and say, like, you should talk to your roommate. This is what's really going to make you feel, she let Mary decide, like, wait a minute, like, the solutions are within me. And what are those solutions? And then we have like this really great plan, this just kind of like making Mary like feel in her body. It could see her talking about how like, oh, going to the gym made me energized and made me sleep better. And she's just like reliving this in her body. Like she's almost in that moment of moving forward and putting herself back into a place where she's not going to let all of these things bog her down. Like I have it within me to make those changes. I have it within me to make my situation, although it's not ideal, better. And I think that Janelle, just by like saying that word, like confident, and pointing out to Mary, like, look, you're so confident about what you need to do. Let's do this. How we're going to do it. And then doing it with her. Kudos.
Great. Mary.
Yeah, that was excellent. And I definitely show my emotions on my sleeve, I guess, when you can see when I got excited. But I actually really, at the beginning, was struggling because I'm sure I probably should address the Paula issue. I felt like that should be the first thing. But it was like, I felt like I couldn't control what she was doing, and it seemed so daunting. And so I like that Janelle just accepted that, okay, let's not go in this direction. Mary is feeling a sense of control over her sleeping. And so that was an example of emphasizing autonomy, it's personal choice and decision-making. I felt like I was in the driver's seat the whole time. And Janelle, again, non-judgmental, empathic, felt like a partner, felt like she was working with me equally, never imposing her own thoughts or ideas. And a lot of aha moments for me.
So I mean, I really always appreciate being the clinician or role playing the clinician, because you really, at least this part, being able to speak about the behind the scenes, what was going on in my head. And so I think a lot of clinicians, this is the part where you get challenged the most, in which you have your own take on what you want to do next and how the client should be moving forward. And you have to almost suppress that in a way, and challenge yourself to use the skills, the MI skills, to guide your client. And you are surprised most of the time, I think, in doing this, that you're really not the person who is guiding the session. And you learn so much from the fact that, yeah, my client is in charge. My client has autonomy. My client knows what needs to be done next. And because that idea is ringing true, not only in my head, but I think it's ringing true in the client's head, they seem motivated, hence the word, right? They seem motivated to move forward with doing this, whatever the task is that they came up with. And, you know, in this scenario, I think it's so easy for many people to say, you need to speak to Paula. Like, you need to be direct, and you need to have this healthy conflict conversation. And I still obviously probably feel that way, but I think what is coming up that's more important, which Francine brought up, was, this is what I have control over. This is going to bring me peace. And this is also going to be me moving towards change. And so, and you have control over it. And there will be no one who can take that away from what you're doing, because these are steps that you have control to change. And so I am supporting you in doing that. And it's actually a tangible skill that you can move forward with. And again, speaking to Paula is not tangible, but I think you're leading this, and because you chose for that to be the next step, that's the healthy route to go.
So let me say one summary. The paradox of MI is that your client is directed where they want. But interesting enough, if you see Elba and Janelle, they both knew where they were going. They both knew where they were going. So they were using their skills to facilitate and rather than direct. So before I learned MI, I sat there, it was like seat of the pants. I had 4,000 interventions, but I wasn't sure what direction, how to move it, when to go here. And if you looked at Elba and Janelle, they knew where they were going. You can see it in the process of when to move ahead, when to move back, when to reflect, when to affirm. They seem to have that process integrated into their approach. So MI, in many ways, is directive, but it's inner directive for the clinician and inner directive for the client. But it's not like you just listen and reflect, but they have a process of how to move ahead and when to move ahead. All right, I'll take a few questions. I have one more spiel at the end I want to summarize what everybody talked about. I don't want to lose that. So we only have time for 2 questions, and then we'll have my summary at the end, and then we'll have more time for some more questions. So, Tiffany, 2 questions.
Yes, we have an attendee asking, can you talk a little bit more about any difference you see in how MI can and should be used in the context of therapy versus its use by case managers or peer workforce? And it looks like more than one person had that question.
Yeah, MI can be used as a standalone approach. So some people come in and they're not sure, and they really need they're really ready to make some kind of decisions. So as a standalone approach, it can be used. And it's used also as an integrated approach. So a person needs other issues, and maybe severity about mental illness. MI is used in a different context. So MI, more often than not, it's used as a combined approach. It's not used as an end in itself. Well, some it can be, but for case management, there's a lot of things in case management around finding solutions, but the MI foundation is always paramount. So whenever I did any other kind of therapy, we had an MI framework, which is collaboration, autonomy, compassion, evocation, acceptance. That's always there, regardless of what you do. But it depends on the client and what the client needs. So there's no one size fits all, but it's used as an integrated approach. Next question.
Okay, the next question is, does sometimes subtle deflections work when guiding the client to her personal goals she needs to achieve or change? And I'm not sure if that may be supposed to be reflections, I'm guessing.
I'm not sure, do you understand the question, everybody? I'm not sure I understood the question.
The question is, does sometimes subtle, it says deflections, but I'm wondering if they meant reflections work when guiding the client to her personal goals she needs to achieve or change?
Okay. Anyone want to try that?
I'm not quite sure what subtle reflections means. Perhaps complex reflection, sort of taking what the client is saying one step further, has an impact on sort of the client reprocessing what they're saying and their thoughts.
Yeah, I think reflections can be followed by an open-ended question. You can reflect back, and I think Janelle did it very well. She got a lot of reflections. She goes, and so where do you want to go from here? So reflections in itself may not lead you to the goal, but it's used in combination what we call open-ended questions. We didn't talk about that here today, but some of the clinician people used it. So reflections become a mechanism in which to begin the process of change. But often you have to ask the question about what's the first step and where do you want to go? So in itself, it may not lead to the change process, but it's used in combination with other methods, which we call in this other processes, open-ended questions, autonomy, summarizing. Don't forget, today's session wasn't to be exhaustive on every strategy we have here. We have a lot of strategies. So we only can talk about, I guess, some specific ones in this context.
Right. Really quickly, I think the question was actually saying subtle deflections. I actually think, but what I think that the question was saying is, for instance, if you wanted to change the direction of what is being said by the client. So subtle, like if you can do it in a subtle way. And if that is the question, I would almost like stay away from doing that, because you're somehow you're still wrestling to still change where the client is going, and it takes away from the autonomy of the client guiding where it should be going, if that makes sense. Even if it's done in a subtle way, you're kind of still trying to take that power back and like fish. I'm imagining you're saying like fishing for the client to go the way that you want the session to go. That's what I got from the question, at least.
And I think that makes sense now, Janelle, when you put it that way. And I think that clients will pick up on that, and it sort of will kind of move the power away from them. So, yeah, you have to be careful.
Whatever you're doing, you're client-centered. I think Janelle's point is well taken. And the client will guide you in some ways. They'll give you the hints of where they want to go and don't want to go. But you have to pick up on it. That's why it's so important to keep listening and keep reflecting on yourself. Is that what's really happening? And as Janelle and other people said, the client can say, no, I don't want to go in this direction. And you have more information. what to do. So let me go to the last part, which is the last slides, and we're going to have some more questions at the end. I want to summarize what everybody's been saying. Okay, so we're talking about doing what matters. And so what you notice in those interviews is meeting them where they're at. What is it they really want to do? And offering alternatives with permission. So a person, if Francine has some of her issues around Paula and really wants Paula to use FaceTime versus in-person visits, that could be one alternative that she could have pursued with her in that context. The other issue is collaborating with them on solutions, not taking matters what you want to happen, but you have to find what really matters to them. And getting those solutions is very often a creative approach. It's something you have to work on conjointly, interactively. Next. Okay, how do you get change talk? Which is one of the most important part of this process. You really want to use change talk and get people to talk about changing the status quo and so on. So first question is you asking about it? What do you think might need to change? What do you think you do in the past? What needs to happen? How important for you? What do you think is the first step and where to go? It seems very simple, but many times people will assume what the change is about or what kind of change. So it seemed like with Carmen, there were certain changes she was ready to do and certain changes she wasn't ready to do. And Elba picked up on that and tried to find out which one of those things, what's the priority here. Next. Okay, so what we know in the literature is the more change talk occurs, doing something different, moving in some direction, the greater chances that it will be followed by behavior. Because one overtly says what change is, usually they want to be consistent with that, and it follows behavior. So what I heard in both interviews is that there was a lot of change talk. And that gives you a great feel of things are happening the more they talk about change. And you didn't hear like, I'm not sure, I don't think this is going to work, and so if you hear that, that's not the right direction you're going. And so as Janelle said, we stay away from that. We don't want to facilitate what you don't want to do. We want to focus on what you do want to do. And so it seems to me whenever I'm doing an interview, I'm listening all the time. Am I evoking change talk? Am I responding change talk? Are we moving in the right direction? And so on. And that's my constant thought about that process. Last. Okay, so this is the bottom line. We have in MI, we have 100 of acronyms. And so these are the things we talk about. And once you hear it, and hear change talk, elaboration. Can you tell me more about it? What do you think is going to happen? What are some of the advantages? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I really want to change very much, and 1 being I'm not sure I want to do it all, is that you want to get them to see on what level they're at on the change talk. And we can talk about the scaling. What does 10 mean? What does 1 mean? And so on. But the major issue here is to get them to elaborate on it, ask for more. Can you tell me more about it? Affirmations. Always encourage and reinforce it and support it and so on and validate it. It's important that you do that continually in the process. And you can forget about that if you don't do it. You need to say, am I doing an affirmations is one of the interventions that has most support. So the more affirmations you give, the better chance of changing occurring. People like to hear things about themselves and feel confident about themselves. And if they feel confident and they feel it's important to them and you affirm or validate that, the chances are it's going to happen in their behavior. Reflections. Restated, accepted, affirmations and reflection as well, but you continue to do that throughout the process, always. If you notice that about 80% of the comments were reflective and then they moved into other directions. The last is summarizing, a very powerful intervention. It's putting it all together and giving the client or the person you're working with what we call a bouquet of flowers. Now, this is what you've told me. This is what I've heard, and so on. This validates the whole process. And usually the end of the interview ends that way by presenting some kind of, so if you notice each of the cases, the therapist or the counselor made some kind of summary and put it together and offered it back. So that's a summary of all the reflections and so on, handing it back to the client to make sure they affirm it and then so on. And that's in a way of getting a sense of commitment for the change process. That's it. One last statement. Okay, so today we have about 10 minutes for questions, comments, and discuss what you learned and what you thought about these skills for your own practice. So I'm opening it up. So we don't need any more slides. That's all four of us. Questions, comments, learning, whether you're going to apply this to your practice or not, we're open to hearing.
Yes, we actually have a couple throughout the presentation, a couple of folks who are asking, does anything change when using MI with children in elementary school age kids? And then also, how can MI be used in the school context or working with adolescents in a private practice?
Okay, I don't want to get into the details. MI is used throughout with people that have memory deficits, chronically mentally ill, children, adolescents, and so on. The process of collaboration, acceptance, compassion, evocation is the bottom. Now you may have to do that, apply it to the children itself or the situation, but MI is used as a foundation. Again, it's not the same answer to all these questions, and kids may need more than that, but it's a framework in which to practice. And rather than go into the details what you do, that I can't do this in a few minutes, but just to give you the sense, MI has been used indifferentially with different populations, in different contexts, with different people, in different settings, and with different populations to begin with.
All right, and then the collaborative nature of MI reminds me a bit of psychoeducation. How can these two frameworks work together in a session with the client?
Anybody want to answer that question? I can answer it, but psychoeducation is a lot of overlaps with case management approaches, indirect, what's the word, Rogerian therapy. I don't think MI has the sort of the framework that it only used for MI. These things are overlapping. So if it's consistent with the MI spirit, then I feel very confident about using it. There are differences in different terminology and family therapy, and we use it one thing. But we've used MI with 12-step approaches with people. As long as it's kept within the collaborative MI spirit, we're very comfortable with that approach. So it doesn't mean that other processes are counter MI. It just means we have to integrate that. What are some of the strengths of MI and what are the strengths of the other approach? But I think there's been a lot of literature about that. But as long as we have MI spirit, it's consistent with the MI approach, then we're okay with it. Other questions?
Yes. We have another attendee asking, how would you use MI with a client who exhibits delusional behavior?
Again, it means that you still want to listen to them and accept where they're at. And if it means dealing with them, it doesn't mean you're colluding with them. It's a different way. So we have a lot of written in the literature about how to avoid collusion with certain kinds of problem. So the message you want to give is how do you then give that client a certain sense of where you are with it. So when I was working with a mental hospital, a person had delusions, I would listen and reflect and so on. It didn't mean I agree with them, but I want that person to feel comfortable and understood and so on. So there may be other things we need to do, but the basic framework of the relationship building is there, regardless of whether they're delusional or they have dementia. You want to come across as I'm with you, I'm here with you, and I want you to feel safe and comfortable in this environment. And so we need to practice that with different populations and different processes. But the processes, the underlying framework is the same.
Okay. And then can you also talk about times where it's necessary to move out of utilizing MI? For example, risk factors?
Example of what?
Of when it would be necessary to move out of motivational interviewing. For example, like discussing risk factors.
A risk, okay. Well, there's a process in MI that if you are concerned about what's going on, and you need to tell the client what to do, what to happen, usually what we do is when we ask permission, and you see is that, so the person's suicide or is doing things that are suicidal ideation, and you just can't keep reflecting, you need to stop the interview and say, and this is still MI. It just means that you're dealing with it. Things come up all the time and stuff comes up. So what we do in MI is ask the person, can I tell you some concerns I'm having about it? You may not want to listen, but I have some concerns. So therefore, you're still asking the client to own it and take some responsibility, even though you may tell the person what you need, what needs to happen, and so on. But it's done in an MI context. If I just say to you, this is not going to work, you should get therapy, blah, 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 you need to go into a hospital, that's not MI. That's persuading and committing some. But saying to somebody, I need to express my concerns, can I have your permission to do that? And that's a whole different process. Expressing, so we have it in the book itself, it's called Expressing Concerns with Permission. So on.
I see a lot of questions about recommendations for resources and books, and I linked to Miller's and Rolnick's third edition of Motivational Interviewing. I linked it to Amazon, but you probably can purchase it in other places as well.
We have time for a few more questions.
All right. We have an attendee asking, I'm wondering if there is a space for clinicians who have been trained on MI to get additional peer support. Is this something that the MI, is this something that the MI Skills Lab project is considering developing, or where can we go if we want to deepen and further our MI skills with others who have been trained in expertise like this team?
Well, Tiffany,
I know, right?
Tiffany, why don't you answer that question?
Okay, fair enough. And then we also have another question asking about, will we be doing MI trainings more widely? And that is definitely something that that Mary Ellen and I are discussing, that the school is definitely is wanting to do and have been planning to do. And now we're going to have to kind of take a step back and just reassess how and when to move forward in the midst of COVID-19. But yes, those discussions are happening, and it's also good to see those questions coming in, and that there is interest in and demand for that as well.
Okay. Other questions?
All right. Yeah, someone has said that I'm developing a volunteer coaching program for community members who are willing to partner with unhoused neighbors and support their journey to greater stability. Is there a really simple MI framework that you would recommend?
You mean MI light versus MI heavy, or MI light? It's a good question. I don't know if we have all the answers to that question. I think we're learning it right now. We have a basic skills lab with the students. It's 7 sessions, it's 2 hours. The students always say they need more or they need some extras and so on. I guess there's never an end to what you can learn in MI, but I think just basic stuff, there is a basic framework I think you can learn, but as you get more intense, it gets more complicated. So I would ask that it's on a continuum. I would say it's a continuum, is MI. But most of our counselors here, and Janelle and Elba and Karina and Mary know, we have a basic pressing model of MI Spirit. And you have to be able to do MI Spirit throughout the process. And it doesn't mean that it involves, but MI Spirit is the paramount process. And the other thing is, we haven't talked about what's not MI. So people that are doing MI have to demonstrate that they're not doing things that we think are counterproductive. So I would put it like, you need to demonstrate some basic counseling skills, and it probably could be applied, but I think the literature is out about that. we don't know. It's disseminated in 30 or 50 countries, and people use it differentially. But I don't think we have a bottom line saying, what is the bottom line MI approach? I don't think we have that right now. We have time for one more question.
Yes, and another question that just came in is MI techniques, can they be used in a victim-centered approach? And I know you're going to touch it based upon like it's all client-centered and leading with the client.
Yeah, we don't see clients as we see this as a joint responsibility. I don't think we look at it as somebody is it's empowering, but the word victim seems to me a kind of a pejorative term and biased. And it's not looking at clients as where they are and what they want to do as individuals. I said, you try to keep an open mind to this process, but using terms that have some kind of stigma attached to it or non-stigma, stigma attached to it, really goes against the MI model of philosophy. We're human beings. We're in this together. We're all the same people. We want to join with you in that process. It's a joint responsibility. But we don't look at it as terms victim and victim or demonize people. I think we try to stay away from those kind of connotations. Anybody else want to comment about that?
Yeah, I think it's empowering, and the client, it depends on how the client is seeing themselves. I don't know if the question had to do with what type of victim, but in the conversation, you're definitely at the center and in charge with the clinician's assistance.
It's part of tied to Carl Rogers as well, is that you're seeing the person as a whole. You're not identifying them by one aspect of their life. So perhaps if you're referring to interpersonal domestic violence as a victim, like you see them not just as a victim, but you're as acknowledging them as a whole and their self-worth.
MI is an evidence-based approach. So whatever the literature tells us about it in terms of populations, we try to go with that process and build it into what we do. There used to be a kind of connotation about children of alcoholics, which was unfounded, about all children of alcoholics are at risk, and we got to be careful, and we have to do something with them. And basically, MI didn't accept that. It said people are people, and they started with that. We don't draw illusions, or we don't draw connotations. We look at what the data say, and the data says people, change whether they're children of alcoholics or not. So we try to build it. It's evidence-based in terms of what the data tells us, and we go with that data and try to use our framework in that model. So I want to thank everybody in this group. There was a terrific presentation. You guys are, your values and your credentials are very, very high, and you demonstrated that today. So my heart goes out to everybody here who presented, and for the hard work and for their ongoing commitment. So thank you all, and thank you, Tiffany and Desmond, for organizing this presentation. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.